and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Josh Brown here. Today's episode is brought to you by Franchise 5. Why Franchise 5? I'm glad you asked. Growing your franchise in a slow, deliberate, and thoughtful manner is a smart way to grow. Franchise 5 helps you do this by expanding 5 locations at a time with a Zen-like focus on the geographic locations that make sense for your growth. To learn more about this, go to franchiseeuphoria.com/franchise5. That's the number 5. So franchiseeuphoria.com/franchise5. Now to today's episode. We've got a really cool interview with Eileen Huntington, who's the CEO and founder, along with her husband Ray, of Huntington Learning Center, the nation's leading tutoring and test prep franchise, which she and Ray co-founded in 1977. Eileen was originally a teacher in New York City and New Jersey, where she witnessed students struggling firsthand, and she and her husband were able to translate those experiences and those lessons from her classroom to pioneer the $4 billion plus tutoring industry. And on today's episode, you're going to learn about Eileen and Ray's story. You're going to hear firsthand how they've been able to maneuver through 40 years worth of work and the number of kids that they've helped. And, it's really incredible. Eileen won the IFA's Entrepreneur of the Year, which is an incredible award and puts her in the category of folks like Dave Thomas and Fred DeLuca of Subway and so forth, as is really one of the giants in franchising. So it was a real thrill and honor to have Eileen on today. And one of the things I want you to pay attention to as you're listening to this is to see how much planning and effort and strategy went into this business before they decided to franchise. I think that's really instructive and something that I think is really important for people who are considering the franchise model. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this interview with Eileen Huntington. Hello, Eileen. Welcome to Franchise Euphoria. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Josh. Thanks for having me on the podcast today. I'm very excited to share Huntington's story and what's happening in franchising today.
I'm really thrilled to have you on. It's great to have somebody on who's been in franchising for a long time. I mean, you've been in this business now for 40 years. And so obviously you've seen ups and downs and a lot of growth. I think at this point, you have around 300 franchise locations, right?
300 franchise locations in 41 states.
That's fantastic. And it's the funny thing is, and this is before we get into the questions, Huntington Learning Center, the first time I ever saw that, I thought, is this part of Huntington National Bank? do you get that?
We get that all the time, Josh. In fact, in some of our centers, people walk in and try and get deposits. And when we say we don't take deposits, people are like, what do you mean you don't take deposits? We said, no, we're a learning center. We're not a bank. We get that all the time, Josh.
So you and your husband, Ray, who I believe was in financial consulting or in something involved in business and financing prior to getting involved in the franchise. And you were a teacher in New York, right?
I was a teacher. I started out as a teacher in New York and then moved to New Jersey and was a teacher in New Jersey for a number of years. And in 1977, we decided to go out on our own and opening a tutoring business. In fact, when we did that, Josh, we were in our 20s. And it was like, whoa, I was on tenure teaching in a school district and, master's degree plus 30 credits beyond that. And it was, I'm going to resign my position and go open a business. My parents thought I was absolutely out of my mind. But, this year or last year, we celebrated our 40th anniversary and we're in our 40th year.
So what was it that led to you thinking that there was a need in the market for a tutoring type service?
I saw by the students that I was working with in the classroom that students were having trouble reading. Students were having trouble with study skills and writing, and saw that, wow, this could be a real opportunity to do this. Nobody, when we look at it, we really created the education industry because there was really no tutoring business at that point in time that was, a brick and mortar business as opposed to the the teachers that went into people's homes.
So, because it's easy now, right? 40 years later, and you see all these different tutoring operations, and it's become a standard part of really learning now. But at the time, like you said, nobody was doing it. There's no model to follow at that time. It's you and your husband sitting there with the idea. Tell me a little bit about that process. I mean, what was that like? How did you work through and kind of figure out how you wanted to start it out?
Well, I think by having the education on my side and having the business on Ray's side was very instrumental in our success, because it's two different skill sets that we're talking about. Setting up how we're going to test kids, instruct kids, using curriculum, to do that. But I can remember, Josh, back in 1977, when I was taking phone calls from parents, we put an ad in the paper and let's see what happens. And taking phone calls. And I remember I quit my job, but Ray didn't quit his job. So it was like, okay, let's not all go out on this. And sure. He would come in, after work in the evening and say, and I'd say, oh, we set up these testings for kids. And he'd say, well, what zip code are they from? I'm like, who cares what zip code they're from? But, again, how are we tracking our marketing? How are we tracking the age of the kids that we're servicing at different times during the year? It was really the business end of it and the education, over the time. Remember, when we started, there weren't computers. There weren't computers in school. We didn't have computers. Everything was done by hand.
Right. You put an ad in the paper. And what does it say? I mean, do you have a curriculum at that point?
We had a curriculum. We had a testing program in looking at being having credits, being a reading specialist, really knowing what kids need. So we had a battery of tests that we would test children on, find out where their strengths and weaknesses are. And we did this in grades kindergarten through grade 12 in reading and math, writing, study skills. And we also, even in our first year, we did tutoring for SAT, and then eventually we did tutoring for ACT, because we had started in New Jersey, and New Jersey was an SAT state at the time. We had, all of this set up, put it in the paper, people called, we tested their kids and enrolled them in Huntington, and we got great results with the program we had. It's extremely structured, what we do with the children that we deal with. In fact, over the next 8 years, and this is pretty hard for folks to absorb, we opened 18 centers out of cash flow. So at that point in time, we really knew that we had a franchise concept. And then in 1985, we decided to expand nationally through franchising. When I think back of in the 8 years opening 18 centers, it even amazes me.
At what point did you hire your first tutor? Because at some point, right? I mean, you're starting off, you put the ad in, it's Ray's still working, you get a response. And at some point you had to figure out, okay, you can't be the one yourself to be tutoring everybody.
No, we hired, when we started, we actually rented an office, got studies carrels, we had curriculum. We had things called control readers then. They didn't have computers, as I said. And we hired teachers. We had teachers hired, trained in the curriculum, which I did. And people called. It's quite amazing.
It is. It's really awesome, too, because I'm sure for the teachers, it was like, well, this is fantastic. I can make some extra money.
Correct.
Doing what I'm already doing, just do it one-on-one after school. So I'm sure you probably that was probably the least of your worries, right? It was finding people to come do the tutoring because you had the teachers.
Right. We had teachers. We had teachers hired. And again, the teachers that we hired when we started out, I was basically the only full-time, and I had part-time teachers. And I also right away had a teacher supervisor. So I hired somebody who could supervise the teachers. I hired somebody else who was, could look at the children's programs and see that they're moving up. So it was really, really structured. We made money, right? I'm going to say we opened in June, and we knew we had a business by August.
When did Ray leave his work?
Ray left the following March.
Wow. So it's interesting because working with a lot of franchises and dealing with people who call with regard to, franchising and so forth. It really runs the gamut. I mean, from the sounds of the start of the story with Huntington, you guys were really structured from the outset. I mean, there's a lot of people who in the same scenario would start this out of their house and just be tutoring and have people come over. But you guys actually put the time and effort in ahead of time to build a structure as opposed to just doing it. And then I'm sure you were continuing to build the structure as you went, but it sounds like you had a pretty good structure just from the get-go.
When we rented the space, we did construction. This was going to be a business. We weren't going to just be, the mom and pop who's doing it in their basement. And also, to advertise in newspapers, you're spending every month advertising. We put a sign outside. I mean, signs cost money. We really made an investment to do this. And we continue that, investment over those next 8 years. But even today, we are continuing the investment and commitment to our franchisees. And they are profitable and they achieve the lifestyle that they want because of the structure that we have.
Tell me this, how difficult, when there's a lot of people that when they go into franchising, and I always recommend that you have at least a few locations open before you even think about franchising, because if you can run a few locations, well, that gives you a little bit of a little bit of a heads up above folks who are just running one location and then try to franchise. You said you had 18 up and going before you franchise. What was that like to go not only from your first one, but like from your first to your second to your third? I mean, I know it usually gets easier the more you have, if you have a good system, but going from 1 to 2, 1 to 3, usually for most people seems to cause the biggest problems or stress. Was that your experience?
I think, again, it was planning. I know we were both running centers. I was running a center. Ray was running a center. And then Ray said to me, look at it, in order to grow, we have to have other people run these centers. So he was like, well, I'm not going to be a center director anymore. And I said to him, when are you going to do that? What do you think? You're not going to run a center and bring money in there? We stepped out of that role and hired full-time center directors in those centers and became managers of those. We had regional people who ran a number of centers. Also, one of the things I should say, when we opened in 1977, and we were opening those company centers over those 8 years, we also, in the midst of this, we had 2 kids. So the year we had a baby, we didn't open a center. So basically, we opened those 18 centers in 6 years. And I think it's all also finding the right people and training those people. I mean, we're an education company, so it was constantly training people how to do the conference, how to answer the phone and talk to parents. A lot went into that. But with people in franchising today, they really do have to have a number of centers before they open. There is no question, Josh.
What was that like for you and Ray going, because one thing I know from owning my law firm, and I have another business as well. And, as an owner, I think it can be difficult because nobody who works for you cares as much as you do as the owner. So what was that like for you as the entrepreneur, you and Ray as the entrepreneurs building this, going from a mentality of obviously owning and operating to now having to, you were going to be managing this. And so you're now going to have to put some faith into some other people who are running these centers, which is the livelihood for both of you at this point. What was that like?
I think because of the type of business we have, and I say business, where we're helping kids, you get people who are committed. People are really committed, especially when they see the results that we get with kids. Even to this day, it still amazes me, Josh, that when we work with a child in Learning Center services, and that's tutoring services in reading, math, study skills, writing, in about 30 hours of instruction, which is less than a work week, we move a kid 1.2 grade levels in reading and 1 grade level in math. It's incredible to me.
Yeah.
It's incredible. In SAT, we have, again, around 30, 35 hours of instruction. We move kids 238 points in SAT, and in ACT, kids increase 5.2 on average. It's just phenomenal.
Is that because of the one-on-one component of it?
Some our exam prep kids are one-to-one. Our students who come to us who can't read are one-to-one. But one of the things we do is we go back and find out what the problem is that the child is having. Where is the disconnect? And we do that from our testing, and we're able to go back and fill in the skills that are missing. And once the child gets the skills, it's incredible to see how much the confidence improves. And then all of a sudden, I'm motivated to do my work. So you change the whole structure of the child's life. You change the whole structure of the family's life, because our programs are totally individualized. You may be sitting next to somebody at the center and they have a totally different program from you because of what we found in the testing. And that still holds true today.
So you go through, you've got these 18 centers. Now you think about franchising. I'm curious. I always ask, what led you to think about franchising? Because most of the time, for a lot of business owners, it's, oh, I had 3 people come in the last week and ask, were we selling franchises? I suspect, though, back in 1985, maybe that was the case. Or did you guys, what led you to really think about the franchise model and then learn about it?
What led us to franchising is we realized that we had a scalable system. Okay. We saw that. And franchising was the way for us to grow nationally. We were basically a regional company. And in order to go and really expand, we decided franchising was the way to do it. And it was a great decision.
Okay. So when you decide then to do it, then what was your next step? Did you reach out? I mean, so I'm thinking back to 1985 and really, obviously franchising was significant, then, but it's really, really boomed over the last, 25 years or so. Who did you reach out to? Did you reach out to consultants? Did you reach out to brokers, or what? Did you reach out to your lawyer in terms of how to take your business from where it was and actually turn it into a franchise?
One of the things that we knew we had to do is we had to have a franchise agreement. So we knew we had to go to a franchise lawyer. And we knew we had the other areas in place because we had training in place for our franchisees, for our company center. So we had the training in place. We had the operation support in place. What we needed was, okay, we need a franchise agreement. So we went and we got a franchise agreement. We were already doing marketing because we had 18 centers that you have to market for. And marketing back then was a lot easier than marketing today. I mean, you put an ad in the Wall Street Journal and you got a ton of calls.
Yeah.
We knew where are the places that you advertise for franchising and a franchise attorney because we had the other areas in place already. And that would be my advice to people who want a franchise. You really have to have the support in place before you go out and do this.
I'm really glad you said that because I preach that all the time, but sometimes I feel like people don't hear it unless they hear it from somebody who's actually franchised a business. The other thing is that I hear, and you spoke about this, a moment ago, after I've turned a business into a franchise or working with the franchisors, the number one thing I hear is, okay, now that I've got this, how do I go and market this? How do I go and find people to buy into it? And you kind of alluded to it that, back then it was a little bit easier because there were less means, first of all, there was less information flow, less means of communication. And nowadays with social media and online, it's not a matter of reaching somebody. It's a matter of too many things reaching somebody. And so you get lost in the noise. What are ways in today's age that you guys are reaching, your target market for franchisees, not necessarily the kids, because I want to talk about that in a second, but in terms of reaching the ideal franchisee to help continue to grow your system?
I think there's many, many ways to communicate the message out there. We do it through the internet. Really, that's a really big part of it. Also, brokers. There are many franchise brokers, even back when we started, maybe not exactly when we started, but after a little while, there were franchise brokers, but there's so many more brokers today. Search is really big. Portals is big. All of those areas are key in bringing in qualified people who can become franchisees.
So you've got, as we said earlier, over 300 locations. What are you guys looking to grow from here? I mean, where are you looking to grow from here? You're in 41 states, 300 locations. Is it all U.S. based?
It's all U.S. based, yes, at this point in time.
Okay. So you may not be able to say, but are you looking to go international at some point, or?
It's something under consideration.
Yeah. Because I guess one of the interesting things is, you've reached a level that, frankly, and most people don't realize this, most franchise systems, if you look at the percentages, have 50 units or less. I don't know if you knew that, but if you look at the percentage of, and that's across the board. Now, most people think of franchising, you said, the McDonald's and Subways and so forth. Those companies make up about 5% because they're just so big. But most franchise systems, are at the 50, 75 level. I'm curious because regardless of where you are now, at some point in time, there had to be some struggles. There had to be something you guys had to work through. Maybe you were growing too fast, or maybe, so you had to increase your operational team. I know that's something that franchise systems struggle with. When do you put the team in place? How do you put it in place? You want to have the revenue coming in that then supports the operation, but it's kind of hard to find that good balance so that, you don't have it mismatched. How did you guys deal with that?
We were very fortunate because with having 18 centers, we had the support in place before our initial growth. So we had a training department. If you don't have the support in place and you want to have a franchise and you're saying, okay, this is going to be great to grow and let's get some money in here, and you don't have people to train them and you don't have operations people to visit them in the field, it's not right. It's not right for you as the franchisor, and it's not right for your franchisees.
Well, and I like how you take that approach because, it's truly has to be a win-win. There has to be value on both sides. And, the best franchise systems that I see are the ones where, the franchisees really value their franchisor and vice versa, because they're carrying the torch for your franchise system. I'm curious with the kids, the number of kids. Have you guys tracked how many kids you have helped over the last 40 years?
I think we have. And I think it's got to be over 1 million kids that we've helped. And it's just remarkable to see. I mean, we have people who are in their 40s who pick up the phone and call and say, look, I'm successful today because I came to you over 30 years ago. There's nothing more rewarding than that. Than seeing how you change students' lives. I mean, we see a child who's coming in to us and saying, gee, I'm so dumb. And it just breaks your heart. And then in a matter of a short period of time, this kid comes in and is getting A's in school. And the child's life is changed around. The family's life is changed around. I say to our franchisees, all our decisions are made with our mission in mind, because we know that when you put the student first, your business will grow.
So do you work with school systems? I mean, do you guys encourage the franchisees? I mean, I would imagine it would make some sense. Maybe I'm off on this, but franchisees in the local areas to then reach out to school systems and so forth to find out kids who may need some help. And obviously you're trying to work through the parents as well, but do you partner up with school systems?
Absolutely. One of the things when we meet with parents is one of our services, we will actually visit the school, talk to the teachers, talk to the school counselors, because we all want to be on the same page. The goal is to help the child succeed. Again, that child is really a walking advertisement for us. And we really have great relationships with the schools. In fact, our results have been validated by third-party studies, including the Chicago Public Schools, Los Angeles Unified School District, many state departments of education, and research firms. In our most recent survey of our SAT and ACT kids, the results, as I said, were 238 points in SAT and 5.2 in ACT. And our students averaged over $50,000 in college scholarship offers. We are just a fabulous, fabulous place for parents, a fabulous place for franchisees. And it's very exciting, to see that. And our franchisees see that.
You mentioned earlier about, I know we've got a couple minutes left, but I'm kind of curious about this. You mentioned earlier about the programming and that it's very individualized. I'm curious about that because obviously the programming has had to change over the years, adapt, adjust, along with, obviously the tools, the technology and everything else like that. How do you go through that process of adapting and changing the programming? And then also, how do you systematize that when it's also so individualized to each person?
Well, our processes in technology, and we've introduced a lot of technology, really enables anyone with any background to produce outstanding student results. It's extremely structured. As I said, when we started out, there weren't even computers in the world. Today, anybody can pull up their KPIs at the center. Anybody can pull up a child's program and know how to actually instruct that child for that child's need. The technology is there. We've made a lot of millions and millions of dollars invested in technology to stay ahead of the curve. It is proprietary software that we use. And I just see that the results we get is really melding our program with with technology. It's fabulous. It just makes you really proud of being Huntington.
No, it's really fantastic. I love, and I think a lot of people can resonate and enjoy not only a successful business, but when you've got the component of you're helping so many kids, it's really hard to beat that, right?
It's hard to beat it. It's really hard to beat it. And I think that's why when we talk about folks, people are really passionate about what we do here.
Well, thank you, Eileen Huntington, the CEO of Huntington Learning Center. Thank you for coming on today. We're going to have all your contact information about the Huntington Learning Center franchise in the show notes and everything like that. But again, thank you for coming on and thank you for everything you're doing. Clearly, you and Ray and everybody on your team and all the franchisees are having a significant impact. And frankly, a much needed impact with where education is right now on a lot of kids. So thank you for that. And I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you so much, Josh, for having me on board today. It was really nice talking about Huntington and how franchising can really, really change not only franchisees' lives, but also students and families' lives.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.